Okay, so without further ado, then let's dive into the personal security. Now, every time I run this lecture, I hope all I'm doing is telling people things they know because personal security is quite front of the market. Everyone pretty much knows what they're doing, or hopes they know what they're doing. So I'm hoping it's just a refresh for everyone. But let's go through it so that we know that what we are all doing. Okay, Marcos, we'll stick with you. Just bear with it, and we'll be great with that, won't we? Okay, so personal cybersecurity. We need to learn to identify what personal cybersecurity is. We'll break that from the business security, which we'll cover basically on Friday. We will look at some of the best practices that you can do to keep your data safe. Understand some of the platform specific security concerns that we have, and we'll talk about how you can literally protect yourself and again, some of the best practices that we can kind of use. So cybersecurity does encompass an awful lot of prospects. So people, processes, technology, and the way that it all develops. And we know it is a rapidly expanding field, and not just in the way that we protect ourselves, but in the vectors that are basically taken to essentially attack our systems. So we do like to break it into two different sets because there is a large difference in the way that a business will approach cybersecurity in comparison with the way that we will do it at home. There's a whole load of risks and a whole load of regulations that apply to businesses that's way out there that we need to understand and we need to get a grips of. But when we talk about personal security, yes, we can be a bit more focused and a bit more caring about what we're doing. So we do break it into two. So we'll cover personal security today. And then on Friday, Ragib is going to cover business security, I believe. And that'll be why I'm up in the Lake District walking a marathon. For some unknown reason, I signed up for that. Okay, so personal cybersecurity then. So we'll talk about certain techniques and best practices that you use to protect your privacy and information. Okay, it's going to include protecting your data, your devices, and we'll fight against unauthorized access and malicious cyber attacks. So we're going to cover the types of cyber attacks you're likely to experience on your personal systems. Okay, it is really important that we do protect our systems. I mean, a lot of the stuff out there is malware. It's not likely to hit you on a personal level, but what are you going to do if all your files and your pictures and everything like that becomes encrypted? Are you going to reach for your wallet and essentially pay someone a ransomware to basically get all those back? Potentially you might do, but they might ask for thousands. So let's try and basically approach it from the other direction and basically be smart, be savvy, and protect our stuff. So we cover four basically conditions there, which are normal for hacking in terms of your personal data. Phishing. Now, phishing will be called phishing, smishing. There's a whole load of different acronyms that are coming out of this nowadays that cover exactly the same sort of thing, but on different platforms. So we're going to talk about that. Malware. We kind of had a little chat about malware just there where I talked about encryption of your data and things like that that can cause problems. Data breaches is involving about someone stealing your data, essentially stealing your NI numbers, stealing your national insurance numbers, or stealing your bank details, etc. So getting details on that. And then we'll talk about something called social engineering, which is actually quite fascinating. And you will be surprised how many people are exposed to social engineering. And we'll talk some more about that. And then there's a beautiful thing called credential stuffing, which isn't exciting, not quite as glamorous as it sounds like, but we would have a little chat about some credential stuffing. So first of all, phishing. Let's have a show of hands. Who has seen a phishing email? Who's been subject to a phishing attack? And I'm going to put my hand up. I see them all the time. Marcus says it's happened to him a couple of times. A bit stupid. If you don't feel stupid about it. If you fall for it, They've done a fantastic job. Okay, that's their job is. You've just not noticed it. We will talk about it. Well, Bird says the junk folder is full of them. Yes, and that's because when we first noticed phishing mails were happening, we worked out an algorithm to try and recognize the phishing mails, and then we stick them automatically into the junk folder. When I say we, we're talking about your mail providers and people like that. Develop systems that go, oh, we think that's phishing. Let's chuck it in the junk folder so they don't even open the thing up. My girlfriend's quite interesting. She has the cleanest junk folder. She will actually, when she's finished reading her inbox, she will open her junk folder and she will read all her junk mail to make sure that none of them are things she should have applied to. And I'm going, you're just wasting your time. They're just in the junk folder, just leave them. If you've not solicited something and it pops into your junk folder, then leave the junk folder alone. That's what it's there for, isn't it? Precious says emails to click on this link, mostly spam. Yes, that's good. Marty says a lot of spam. There's always one in spam, basically, says Ronell. So I think it's fair to say that we do get them, but how can we recognize them? Is it easy to split between a legitimate email and an illegitimate email? We know they're basically getting, these people on the dark web are basically getting more and more complex in the way they do things. Okay, some of the goals here that they're basically looking for, they're looking for your usernames, your passwords, any credit card numbers, any social security numbers, depending on which country, depends on what that is. So any details they can get from you. So we kind of said they come in different flavors and different forms. Okay. So we need to be continuously aware of what's basically hitting us. Ever vigilant, I think is the words that we tend to use nowadays. So email is tends to be called as phishing. So that is just our general one, where it's just a general attack. The guy pretends to have a fake website or something like that. Says, click on this, please come back to us. That end of things, where they're literally trying to gain your details. Okay, then there's what's known as spear phishing. So spear phishing is more targeted. They're not just dragging your net, trying to get everyone. They are specifically targeting a particular person. They will tailor the message for that individual. They will use your name. They will use some details they might have got from you to gather information. They may even represent a company or something like that that they believe you've got some dealings with to try and get some details from you. Then there's vishing. Vishing is basically, as I told you that there's lots of different ways to say these things. It's basically the same thing, but someone's phoning you up. Okay, and they'll normally be quite abrupt, quite firm about things, telling you it's quite important. They might even threaten you with legal prosecution. They might say, well, if you don't answer my questions, that exposes you to a legal challenge, and we'll be referring it to the Crown Prosecution Services or to the Federal Bureau of Investigation or something like that to try and trick you, to force you into giving you details. They will put time constraints on it. They will say, well, if you don't do it now, you're going to have a fine tomorrow and something like that. So they will literally try and force you into doing things as quickly as possible, catching you off guard. Okay, and then there's what's known as smishing. So smishing is simply SMS. So this is text and includes, you can probably throw in all the other textual methods that we have, such as our WhatsApp and messengers into that. So again, they're basically doing fraudulent text exactly the same way as we receive emails after exactly the same details. So any crumb of details they can get from us, that is what they're after. And then there's the farming attack. Okay, farming tends to be indirect victims of fraudulent websites without their knowledge, attacking multiple domains. Okay, setting the system compromised routers to achieve things. So they might try and attack your DNS system. Now, as a quick refresh, live chat, who can tell me what DNS does for me? Look, we have a bit of a refresh in these as well, isn't that good? It's a domain name service. What does it do for me though, Marty? See Paul's typing in there as well. Several people typing, that's good. Hope we'd all basically get an answer to this one. Well done. Darshil wins the small amount of sweets basically coming in your direction. Fantastic. Uh, Maljec's in there as well. Transfers IPs to names, names to IPs. Goes both ways, so it does both. Yeah, phone book of the internet, Ronel. Really good summary. Thank you very much for bringing that in. So if they can get access essentially to your router and they can change the domain settings, well, they could change it so that your default domain is their domain server. At which point they can simply redirect all your websites. You think you're hitting Google, you think you're hitting your bank. In reality, they've just changed those, relabeled the IP addresses. All of a sudden, you're going to their fake websites. You think it's genuine. Not very nice for you to experience, certainly. Okay, so that is farming, okay? Anyone got any particular questions about those particular attacks or those particular vectors that they can use? Good. Okay. Let's have a hands up. Who thinks they'd be able to identify a phishing email if they saw it? See how many people are confident with being able to do that. Ronell says he'd be able to identify it. That's good. Peter, yep. Precious, Mardy, Paul, Luca, Maximilian. There's lots of them basically think they'll be able to identify it without any problems. See a couple of you type in there, so let's let them finish off. Most of them for Maximilian Prince. The content of the mail. Andres basically says, yeah. Okay. Well, that's pretty good. I mean, we all feel fairly confident that we could do that, don't we? So why don't we have a little look then? What we're going to do is we're going to break you into 3 breakout rooms. And what we're going to do is we're going to give you a email. Now, we know, I've cheated, we know this email is basically a phishing mail. What I want you to do in the teams, in your breakout rooms, is select 3 or 4 or 5 items on here. See how many items you can find on here that give it away as a phishing email. So make it obvious that it is a phishing email. And then we're going to give you about 5 minutes to do this because it's quite a quick task. And then when we come back, we want 1 volunteer from each of the breakout rooms. And we're going to go round robin. So we're going to do group 1, point out what you think was the first one. Group 2, point out what you think another one. Group 3, till we kind of exhaust it all. So let's see if we can basically get through several rounds of this. Now, I know how many issues there are with it. Okay, and it's up to you to see. It's like finding the difference, spot the difference, isn't it? See who can get the most differences in there. So we're going to pop you into breakout rooms. That is the email that Ragib has fantastically poked into live chat. Thank you very much, Ragib. So what you got to do is select the areas that you might think are suspicious, and we'll do that. So let's open the breakout rooms. I'm going to start in one room and jump between the others. So I'm going to jump between a couple of rooms, which will be great fun for me. I'm wondering how close we're getting to the 5 minutes now. Okay, are we all back now? Thumbs up for Asha. All rooms closed now, are they? Oh, beautiful. Thank you very much, people. Okay, so you all had a little dive away. You all had a little bit of an explore on the email, thinking, yes, we can recognize it all. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to simply have a little round robin where room 1 will tell me their first one they found. Then room 2 will tell me their one. Room 3, and they have to be different ones, of course. You know how this goes. I know I play games with my kids where they can't pick the same animal twice or something like that. It's a bit similar to that. So room 1, did we manage to find a amazing spokesperson for room 1, didn't we? Can they unmute themselves and tell me where their first error was or where their first suspicion was on this email?
Okay. It's Precious speaking. We had the suspicions from the email address because it's being directed to the student from the student profile. So the email address should be from the school because the student profile is actually should be from the school. That is where we had our first
That's
suspicion.
fantastic, Precious. So Precious basically says, I mean, let's look at that email address. No one has an email address 9029409 at something, do they? That's probably not a very sensible mail address to have. And then the wording on it, makeeasymoney.com. Fantastic. Okay, room 1, well done. Let's see how we can drift in on room 2. Now, room 2, I think they were being a little bit camera shy, and I think they were going to poke it into the live chat. Is anyone from room 2 either going to come off mic and have a chat, or
Chat or like
I'll pop it in for
Yeah,
you?
hello, good day, everyone. It's Peter speaking.
Peter.
Peter. Yeah, from the security number, giving that security number, never on net should anyone give out it's our security number, and that is phishing from there. And from what Precious said, as from the email, 30 points, you can also see make easy money. On planet Earth, there's no way somebody can make money easily. So that is also phishing as well,
Very good answer.
Very
There's
good
no
answer. There's
money
no
in this book, he
money in this
said.
book, he said.
Definitely no easy.
Definitely no easy.
If we're getting
If we're
echo,
getting echo,
have other microphones turned on. Thank you. Okay, so that's good from room 2. Room 3, who volunteered in room 3 then? Room 3, did we pick anyone up for your group, Ragib?
I think it was Paul. It's saying it's not letting him unmute.
Oh, no, hold on. It's come on.
Perfect,
Hey,
Paul.
David.
Thank you, Paul.
I am mate. Right, or one of the ones we found, or one of the good ones I thought one of the group found was the link, the Make Money Now link. It's a hidden
Yep.
link, so you can't actually see where or have any idea where that link is going to take you. So you don't know if it's a legitimate site or if it's a phishing site.
Yeah, it's perfect, Paul. That's exactly it. Look out for links in all these systems. Remember, the majority of these are going to try and direct you to somewhere else where they're going to ask you for a username and password. Even if it's a new account and they say, hold on, you don't have an account on this website, please give us your username and password. Most people reuse passwords, which is a horrible thing to do. But if you're reusing your passwords, then straight away they've got a password that they will potentially, and we'll talk about this later, try on different websites. Thank you very much, Paul. That was perfect. Okay, back to room 1 again. That was Precious, wasn't it? What else did you find, Precious, in your group?
Yeah, we found first there was no company name, and there is no job description on the email. So there is nothing to identify the company per
There's
se.
no company identifier. Yeah, always a good clue, isn't it, to work on that, and no full job description or no offer for the job description. That sounds very good. Thank you very much for that, Precious. Back on to Peter, I think, from group 2. What do we have, Peter?
So the other one that I found from our group is when somebody giving you an offer, it's telling you to hurry up or not to miss this lucrative offer. You have to be careful as well, you know.
Yeah.
Having a limited time slot available for students, that is no go area. That is a very dangerous space, you know.
Yes, and again, we
Yes,
see
and
here.
again, we see here.
Thank you, Peter. That's fantastic. We see a traditional tactic here where they're literally trying to rush you. You've got to do it now. You've got to do it now. You've got to do it now. And that's when we get a bit muddled in our heads and we think, oh, it could be okay. Let me try it anyway. Okay, so avoid that. A definite clue if it's a phishing mail. Now we're on to Paul. Paul, what other ones did you pick out in your team? It's not just Paul, it's the whole of group 3, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah, man. Yeah, we got that as well, the scarcity, trying to rush you into making a decision. But it was also flagged about the telephone number that is a Nigerian area code or country
Oh, who
code.
looked that one up?
Kablan, was that right? Was
Well
that you, mate?
done. Well done, Kablan. Yes. So it's
He's
an
got a spot that,
international
man.
telephone code, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really,
So yeah,
really
so
well done for picking that up.
sorry. So with that, it's no, I'm trying to word this properly, but it's
I know the
spam
feeling,
emails and
Paul.
all from coming from that area.
I know the feeling, Paul, certainly. Yes, certainly if I'm in the UK and someone's offering me, potential job opportunities and his telephone number's in another country, Nigeria or such, I'm thinking, hold on, how's that going to work? And he's offering me $300, that's US dollars. So I'm worried about what he's actually paying on there, isn't he? Really good stuff. Okay. So we're going to kind of basically bring that to the end. That's fantastic. Well work, everyone. I'll show you the list that we basically have. Maljack's basically poked a few things up there as well, haven't you, Maljack? Like here. So the ones that we kind of put in here, and some of these aren't as common as they used to be. Certainly the email address being slightly weird and funky. Yes, it's not coming from essentially any student mail or anything like that. The misspelling is quite often something that happens. So opportunity, I probably would have spelled this wrong anyway, has 2 P's in. The next one down is basically they haven't used your name. They're offering you a job. They haven't even used your name. That straight away says mail shot at very least. Potential scam. Let's ditch that one. So they're not really approaching you, aren't they? Quick and easy money. We said no one makes quick and easy money. And they're asking you to fill in your personal details. So to fill in the form with your personal details at this website, where we basically all pointed out, yes, it's a jump to another website. They're trying to get your details. Be sure to have your banking information. No one should ever ask you for your banking information. Not online, not with an unsolicited email. Asking again for your social security number, only open to the first 25, and then trying to rush you in. And as was fantastically pointed out, the international telephone number. Wow, that is really good. Okay, any questions about that phishing mail? Now, we said they basically do it on texts nowadays. So SMS messages, you'll get a similar thing. You'll get a similar script over the telephone. So all these key things we need to bear in mind whenever we answer something, be that an email, a text, or a telephone call. Marcos has got a classic there. Click here to win an iPhone 16. Yes, it's that sort of thing we need to be aware of. Win a lottery. Good. Well, I hope you found that useful. I certainly really enjoyed it. Good work from all the groups there. Well done. So we'll have a little bit of a discussion about some of the descriptions on some of these items. Okay, we all know malicious software is basically known as malware. It's used to infiltrate your computer and steal your information. Yes, we get it from emails, we get it from pen drives we accidentally pick up and things like that. So we'll get it from there. Here's some examples of things such as a keylogger. A keylogger is very simply designed to record every single keystroke that you make on your system, and it will send that off to the third party. Now, of course, with every single keystroke, if they read all that, potentially they can pick out things such as a username and a password, and they can link that to the website that you might have basically tried to go through. Then there's spyware. Now, spyware is basically a more complicated keylogger. Keyloggers are very simple, very lightweight, very tricky to detect. Whereas a spyware, slightly more bulky, it does screen capturing. So it captures your image of what you're basically doing. And that, of course, allows it to track mouse movements and websites that you're basically clicking on. So although you're clicking on to, say, for example, a popular website that you favorited, that'll be able to pick that up because they're capturing the screen movements. And then there's our good old-fashioned Trojan. Okay, so Trojan is a type of security threat that essentially disguises itself as some legitimate software to trick users into installing them. What's the most common piece of software that we attempt to install? Probably not true nowadays, actually. Certainly in the past, there used to be a really common type of software we used to try and install. Kibitsu makes an interesting point. We'll let you answer that question as well. A person with an English name and an Indian accent calls you. That's really strange because, yeah, good look at antivirus and spyware. When companies move to outsourcing, which is basically the idea of an English company paying a foreign company to do things like technical support or do their customer care because it's cheaper in those countries, there was actually a habit of encouraging those foreign workers essentially to use English names, and they'd even get them to look up the weather report. So these are legitimate things, okay? So yes, so you can imagine them basically doing it to try and get on there. Luca, we're going to come into how do you detect spyware, but generally it's about running your antivirus system properly and making sure you have scans. Alvin says the most thing we most install is antivirus. Not always. Generally, in the old days, certainly the most common thing that we used to hunt for and download were things like drivers, printer drivers, screen drivers, scanner drivers. So whenever you went onto a website, Google, and typed in such and such a download driver for such and such a printer, that used to be very common. Nowadays, they're all in a Windows library or a Mac library or something like that. So it's much more plug and play nowadays. But certainly that used to be the most common piece of software we'd install. Now, where would we get those software from? Well, we'd search the website. So we'd search the websites for it, and someone would go, oh, here's a load of downloads. Here's a driver center that's providing you loads of drivers. Well, those drivers could simply be malware. We're clicking on them, going, yeah, install that printer driver. It could be a genuine printer driver with a bit of malware basically attacked on the back. That's essentially what a Trojan is. And it works in that manner. Chrome browser, get with the Internet Explorer. Yeah, we all install different browsers, don't we? We spark up our PC. One of the first things I tend to do is install Chrome on it. There are other browsers out there you can definitely use. Marty basically says, is there a way to protect my phone number from scammers? They are relentlessly on call a lot. Yes, unfortunately they do. We'll talk about why they've got that and how they managed to get those details. So data breaches, and this is probably where they might have got your phone number from, or you might just have given it out somewhere. So data breach is simply an unauthorized attack on your system where they're grabbing as much information about your personal details. People used to do things such as store personal details in notepads, Word documents, Excel sheets. They'd have things like their children's date of birth for us men that can't remember them half the time. And they simply put them in places like that were very convenient, very handy. But of course, because they're on your system, someone can get onto those and they can strip those details. So they'd be after things such as names, addresses, email addresses, financial data, health records, browsing history used to be a popular one that they used to strip, address books and passwords, and it kind of goes on from there, doesn't it? And this is really what they're after. And part of the reason they're after this is because then it leads on to the next options. There is a human element to all of this. There's something which is termed as social engineering. So it's basically the technique of manipulating and deceiving people using information we have about each other, about information, for example, for me. Someone may have information about me. They may try and use that information, not to blackmail, but to persuade me to do something, persuade me that they are genuine in that sort of form. And where can anyone get information about me from? That's a question to the room then. Question to live chat. Where can someone find out information about me? Dark web. You wouldn't have to go that far, to be honest with you, Luca. LinkedIn. Bang. We put our details on LinkedIn. Social media. Yep. Facebook, LinkedIn, all that social media platforms. There's details about me. There's pictures of me. So, potentially where I travel, etc. My holidays, where I live. I may be in the social groups. Okay, they can certainly get my name, potentially my wife's name. Happy for that, ex-wife. My girlfriend's name, my children's name, potentially their ages, because there's birthdays being celebrated. So as soon as they get things like that, well, hold on, they've got my birthday because my kids have posted something on Facebook about my age. So straight away, they've got my name, my birthday, my two children name, probably a few pictures of our pets up there. So again, they've built up now a bit of a picture of me. With that picture, they can then contact my friends. They can probably say, oh, my cat has basically been run over. I need some money for the vet bill. Can you lend me some money for the vet bills? Okay, well, because they know me, they know my name, they know my cat's name. My friend might go, oh, that must be David, because he's got the name right and he's got the pet's name right. So again, this is what social media basically the social engineering allows them to do. Paul Bird basically makes a very valid comment there, which is basically the weakest part of a computer system in terms of security is normally found between the seat and the keyboard. Yes, it's us. Right, on that then, let's see. Now they've got all these details from us, and we'll talk about some dark web stuff. Let's talk about credential stuffing. Credential stuffing is literally on the dark web, and not even on the dark web. Companies, well, probably more dark web. There's two forms of basically data selling and distribution that basically happens. Whenever you sign up for a website, we sign up for a particular products, you give them your name, your email address, and you tick a little box that says, yes, you can share my details with your associates or other registered companies. That straight away means they have now got a database of names, email addresses that they are going to sell to someone else. They're going to sell that to that third party. That third party may then sell it to someone else, who may then sell it to someone else. So strangely enough, your telephone number that you filled in on one website is now owned or known by 36 other mailing companies out there. Lots of marketing stuff you're going to get. You're going to get those random calls that say, oh, were you involved in an accident? We can claim some money back for you. All that sort of stuff. Whereas your insurance claim, or did you have a diesel car at this particular time? We can get some money back for you. That's what happens in terms of illegal access to your data. Now, if you push that a little bit further, we know full well that lots of websites have actually been hacked in the past. Okay, some have been data breaches where they have got hold of username, password, and details, bank details, and things like that. So now, while it's a regulation that anyone who basically gets hacked like that, any company that gets hacked, has to make it public. LinkedIn was a big one. Yeah, and there's plenty of others out there, isn't there, that basically had data leaks. So those usernames and those passwords are now floating around the world. They are for sale on the dark web. Someone is basically flogging them onto someone else. So what do they use it for? They use it simply for what's called credential stuffing. They take my email address and my password that they think they've got, and they will simply stuff it into every single website they can find until they get a hit. So they will try my banking sites. They will try not even my banking sites. They will try every single location they can get to until they get a score. Okay, so LinkedIn basically had some problems. Yahoo had some problems. There were some massive ones. Yes, exactly. Equifax was one. So there's loads out there. So this is where all our details go. And this is why it becomes so important that we begin to look after ourselves. Okay, they will simply reuse those passwords. We've got to make sure that we do not use the same password again and again and again. We don't use simple passwords. We don't use our pets' names. Because again, they can get the pets' names from the social media, can't they? Good. I'm just reading some of the comments in there. There's a very good comment. Certainly stuff from Paul coming through. Now, is there an easy way I can find out if my password has been compromised? Because we are getting more and more help from technology now to try and protect ourselves against this. So if I believe, yeah, there are sites out there are websites that will give you details. So have I been PWD? PW Indeed is one. I believe you spelled that right, Paul. I have to double check the spelling. I know certainly my Google Chrome will let me do it. So if I go to my passwords on Google Chrome, it'll simply give me a report of all the passwords that they believe are weak on my system. So these are all the passwords that it's saved that it believes are weak. And they check it with a database because there's some massive databases out there of compromised usernames against passwords. And they'll check it against it and go, this is near to that weak password you used. Doesn't use an exact match because we know a lot of the time when we change our passwords, what do we simply do? We change the last letter. We put an exclamation mark or a quote on the end of it. We make it from password 1 to password 2, then to password 3, then to password 4. We're simply making small changes. So it does check for like symbols, pretty much similar items on there. So you literally have to go really careful about it. but the tools are there to help you, and they will simply pop up and go, you should change this particular password because we think it's been compromised. So how do we protect ourselves? We know straight away, let's use caution for unsolicited mail messages. Use strong and unique passwords for each account. I know whenever I create a new account, Google Chrome will literally suggest a 15 to 20 letter password with lots of capitals, numbers, different symbols in it, and says, do you want me to use this really complex one? And I'll hide it for you. It puts it in things such as a keychain, doesn't it? Why do so I don't have to remember how complicated that password was. It drops it into something like a keychain. Now, Apple and Android keychains use 256-bit AES encryption. Okay, that's the current gold standard of encryption. So no one's basically going to crack those particular passwords or get access to that password keychain. That's the idea. And that means we can pick more complicated passwords. Or we get the system to assign a ludicrously complicated one. Otherwise, it mentions here, monitor your financial accounts. Okay, we all know it's easy to look on our banking apps. I know my banking apps basically will tell me if there's any money going out or if there's any sizable money going in. And I'll get a little ping on that little application that says, oh, David, you've spent some money at this pub, or you've had some money paid into your account. So monitor those, because that's normally the first sign that you have. Make sure your system is fully security patched. So when you get those annoying notifications, either on a Mac, they get them on the Mac as well, or on a Windows PC that says, oh, we want to apply the security patch. Can we do it? Yes, should be the answer. Don't wait weeks, don't wait months. Just simply go, let it reboot. Sometimes it basically takes a little while, but it's important we do that. Do it when we're not busy, because sometimes the Windows one can take up to about an hour when it runs properly, and I've seen it crash several times. But yes, make sure that our security patches are updated. Now, your ISP, your internet service provider, should be making sure that your little firewall is updated automatically. So they will basically put updates to that system for you. Educate yourself and your family about the risk of sharing information. Okay, that's about dates of births and all that sort of side of things, basically on the internet, isn't it? This is all your social media things. We recommend you use what's known as multi-factor authentication. We'll have a little chat about MFA and 2FA later, and we go into a bit more description there. And if you can, bang things into a keychain. Okay, 256-bit AES encryption is really good for that. Okay, that means no one should ever basically be able to get into your keychain to look at it. And that means your complex passwords can be super complex. 20 characters mixed with uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and magic symbols in there as well. Any questions about how to protect yourself? That's the initial part anyway. They're kind of expanding on things. Viruses. Okay, we know viruses attach themselves to legitimate files and spread and infect things. Trojan horses are used to disguise themselves as legitimate files, like I said, downloading drivers or bits of software. Worms essentially are self-replicating that can spread across simple networks. Not so much simple networks. I think it was a set of ransomware that basically half crippled the NHS. And indeed, it was ransomware that had brought down a whole load of shops recently, isn't it? I think M&S basically crashed their websites and everything from ransomware attacks. And the spyware is basically the piece that sits on your system and gathers information, recording bits and pieces on there. So it can then basically hide those keystrokes, send them off to the dark web and sell those on. Now, are we all safe? I love Mac users, but go careful now. There's more and more viruses around for the Mac OS. Linux probably still a bit less, but they're certainly thinking about it. You can consider the majority of websites are basically running on Linux boxes. But Windows, because it is the most widely used operating system, is really where everything targets. So a Windows system, make sure you've got an antivirus system on there. Okay, because this is where the targeted attacks tend to happen. As I said, the Mac OS, you are getting away with it at the moment, but please think about features like Gatekeeper, File Vault, and watch out where you get those executable downloads from. Remember on the Mac OS, when we talked about the Mac OS, you can get things from the Apple Store, or you can actually get a DMG file, can't you, off of the web somewhere. DMG files are not cleared by Apple, so the DMG files are the ones you need to be a little bit suspicious about, because happily that's where someone could probably stick a Trojan or a virus basically onto the system, isn't it? Now, mobile users, currently, I can see people typing, that's good. Mobile users are much more secure than the regular operating system we have. Okay, they are less susceptible to malware, but it's all about apps permissions. So it's all locked down for permissions and what can and can't be done on those systems. So the iOS and Android does basically lock everything up fairly tightly. So it's not as expanded and easy to do as your Mac OS or your Windows OS in terms of a virus attack. So they don't tend to attack those things very much. Yes, Marcos points out basically there, if you're basically doing a DMG from a Mac OS or a Linux one, then yes, it will pop up and say, are you really sure you want to do this? Okay, and then after that, it's your fault if things go wrong. It's a good little get out of jail card, that one. Thank you, Marcos, definitely. There's a famous phrase in the UK. I don't know how much this is used around the rest of the world. There's a famous phrase that is basically curiosity killed the cat. Okay, and this is all about how they basically do USB dropping. Okay, these people will simply drop a USB stick on the street somewhere. They'll leave it there. It will have a virus on it. It may have some files on there just to pique your interest. And the majority, well, not the majority, but certainly in the past, people would pick these up and they'd go, I wonder what's on that, being super curious. And then they'll stick it into the USB drive. Okay, potentially as soon as you plug it into the USB drive, it runs an auto-run script that then basically sets the virus off and sets it on its way. It might then underneath appear to be totally harmless, so you won't actually notice what it's done. And that could have installed something like a keylogger on your system that you wouldn't know about. And then you basically become more susceptible to any forms of attacks, don't you? So these are common forms of attacks. But think about it for security as well, going the other direction. If you're traveling with the USB stick, why don't we have it encrypted? Yes, we can encrypt USB sticks. Yes, let's basically make sure the USBs are either encrypted. Tools such as BitLocker, VeraCrypt is another one that you can basically use. And there's other hardware encryption tools that you can basically use on these as well. So it needs to add that layer of protection to prevent anyone from getting into the stuff. Antiviruses are also your protection as well. So AVs, make sure antivirus is updated. And you can password protect the devices as well. So if you do happen to leave it on a train or it drops out of your bag, no one will be able to pick it up and get those details off of it. So who's heard of, that's a good question, who's heard of a man in the middle attack? Let's have a little show of hands. Paul Bird has, yes. Good. As I say, I like to think this is just a refresh for everyone and they should basically know a lot of these things, but not sure. Okay, well, let's have a quick explanation. A man in the middle of an attack is really about someone sitting in between you and essentially the router. Probably best if we throw up a diagram in here. Sometimes it's called evil twin. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's called something totally different. what basically happens is this happens in places like coffee shops or places or hotels, restaurants where you are able to get hold of the Wi-Fi access. Now, of course, they produce an SSID, which is the Wi-Fi ID, with a password. Now, it's possible that someone can set up their own device and they can mimic that SSID and that password. Well, when they do that, your device might connect to their evil twin, and that evil twin simply forwards on all the data. So although you've connected to the evil twin, as far as you're concerned, you are accessing the proper website because it is getting all the normal refreshes, all the normal data is coming back without any problems, because its job is not to interrupt that. Its job is simply to strip all the details that you're passing backwards and forwards to the web. So that's what the evil twin does. It sits between you and essentially the legitimate Wi-Fi and simply strips all the data. Now, of course, these are very common in places, as I said, pubs, coffee shops and things like that. They do provide you free Wi-Fi. So whenever you go into these places, please do not do things like your banking from those locations, because you might fall susceptible to this sort of an attack. See Marcos type in there. No, it's not in movies. It's not just in movies. It is real. It is reality. Because whose signal did yours basically pick up? When you go to an SSID, it will simply pick up the strongest signal. So if you happen to be sitting closer to where the evil twin is than the actual Wi-Fi router, then yeah, you will basically drop onto their network and they will simply strip everything. Ah, Marty asked a really good question there. If you're using a VPN, as in a private VPN, but connect to an evil twin, do you still lose the information? The general answer on that should be no, but that depends on your VPN client. The idea with a VPN is that it is encrypted tunnel from your NIC. So when it leaves your NIC, it is encrypted until it gets to the other end. That means the evil twin will only be able to see your encrypted data. So a lot of encryption will not be able to get access to. So VPNs are definitely better if you're basically using it in an open workspace. Marcos, the point is you won't know that you've picked up an evil twin because the SSID and the password will be exactly the same as the location you're in. You simply will not know. You will see no difference. The only way you'd be able to tell is if you knew what IP address their Wi-Fi router was supposed to be on. But you won't know that. You're never going to walk into a coffee shop and go, can you tell me the IP address of your Wi-Fi router? And they will turn around and go, no, get out of my shop. So they won't be able to tell you it anyway. Okay, so you basically are doomed. Do things that are not banking, that are not super secure. Or, as we mentioned, get a decent VPN that allows you to do it. Paul Bird, I love that, Paul Bird. I love that idea. A security team set up a fake Wi-Fi in a coffee shop not too long ago. Okay, part of the T's and C's says something about you had to sacrifice your pet and give them your child. How many people actually read the T's and C's? It's a classic, isn't it? You just make up some T's and C's, tick at the bottom. Oh yeah, tick at the bottom. I just want to get on with my work. Just want to get onto the internet. Or you just agreed to sacrifice your pet and give them your child. So yes, I hope they sent people emails that basically connected up to that and said, look, this is the T's and C's you've actually signed up to. So do be careful on third-party and public internet connections. It's not just in movies. Okay, before we have a break, a little bit of a summary. So we've had a good chat. I can see Paul's still typing. I love some of the stuff you come up with, Paul. It's really good. So we're going to chat about malware, exactly what it is. It's included in viruses, ransomware, and spyware. And when you talk more about the business end, when we chat about that on Friday, yes, we'll go into some more depths in terms of what ransomware is and how it basically kicks you in the pants. and what it does for companies. We know passwords. Let's keep them safe. Let's protect ourselves. Okay, let's use keychains. Let's use really complex passwords. Do not reuse passwords. We had a good look through a phishing one, which was fantastic. Thank you very much for all the input from that. And we've discussed identity theft. UB keys is another one. Yes, Kaplan, there's more than one, basically, password protector out there, isn't there? Password managers are great. Definitely password managers are fantastic. Make sure they've got the proper encryption on them when you purchase those. And super password generators are good as well. We understand you, Paul. We understand. Okay, so we're now going to have we're going to have a 10-minute break where we can all grab a coffee, a comfort break. We will go into 2FAs, Luca, which will be fantastic. And we'll discuss a little bit about the differences between that and MFAs. So we hope we get some smashing tunes on now. And I will see you in our 10 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. Well, I hope you had an opportunity to get yourself a coffee or a comfort break or an apple or a banana, whatever you happen to fancy. And you're raring to go now. Let's have a thumbs up for who can see the small office, home office network system. Peter, thank you very much. Fastest fingers. Mardi, Maximilian, Marcos, Fintan, Ronel, Paul. Beautiful. Sorry, I just needed that quick sip of coffee. Okay, so host, we kind of went through a bit of these in the network stuff. So a lot of this is, again, going to be a bit of a recap for what we're basically doing. We know we all essentially have what we consider to be a SOHO device in our homes. It's basically the router that the internet service provider gives you. It covers our firewall. It is our firewall. You can go and tweak it and make changes to it. Generally, we don't tend to do that because we tend to leave that to the ISP to basically look after. But feel free, if you want to make your area super secure, to open up that and make some changes. But please bear in mind, you've got to know what you're changing in there. It handles our NAT, our network address translation. That's the piece that basically defines the difference between our external IP address. So whenever we talk out, we do not give our internal IP address, we give an external IP address that sits with the router. And that means that anyone who is basically receiving or looking at those packets will only ever see the external IP address and not our internal one. It will not be able to tunnel through because the NAT basically controls that end. It does our DNS, our domain name services. Okay, so it basically converts our IP addresses and real names and vice versa. It does our Wi-Fi. So it does our security, WEP, WAP, WAP2, WAP3. So there's lots of different versions on there. We'll have a little chat about those in a minute. And it does a radius and tactics. I always have trouble pronouncing that one. So let's have a quick dive through some of these things. So we know our DNS, we covered that very simply, and we had an early question that you got that right, perfect. So it basically converts essentially a usable, readable name, such as example.com, gets converted by the Soho DNS or our DNS on our local machine into a physical IP address. That is fantastic. We're all very familiar with that now. It does our DHCP protocol. We all love DORA because what DORA does is it gives us our IP addresses. So we have a discovery, an offer, a request, and then an acknowledgement. So that is our DORA protocol for DHCP. If anyone doesn't quite understand these, please do put up a hand or throw something at the screen so I can basically cover those again for you. This is just really designed as a recap for those two that our SOHO device basically gives us. Then we have our Wi-Fi security. Well, let's have a good question here. We've got an option there as to which Wi-Fi security we pick. We know the differences are basically giving on that table. If we have a choice, which security do we pick? And please smash this into the live chat. Not a trick questions. I don't ask trick questions today. So out of all those ones that we got up there, which one would you pick for your Wi-Fi if you had a choice? The pressure's typing away there. That's good. Several people are smashing one in there. That's good. Marty basically goes WAP, WPA2, WPA3, Josephine WPA3, Precious WPA3 or WPA2, WPA2. It's really interesting, isn't it? We are very familiar with security. Every time I speak to someone about security, if you've got different levels of security, why would you not pick the highest possible level of security? If I've got an option to do WPA3s, I'm doing WPA3s on my Wi-Fi network because the security level is really high. It gives that extra piece of security to you. It's highly resistant to vulnerabilities. The only reason I'd ever go for WPA2 or a lesser one is for compatibility reasons. I think I mentioned it before when we talked about the networking. My dad has a really old pad, essentially, tablet that he wanders around with. And that tablet, for some ungodly knows reason, Samsung has decided not to upgrade the operating system, so it supports WPA3. So strange enough, he's had to buy himself a new pad because he needs to use it around my house. So we normally go for the highest security possible. Yes, because it does keep us safer. It's all about security and security. Now, other forms on that security end of things, I said we talk about radius and tachicus. I always have struggle getting my tongue around that one. They are slightly different features. They are what is known as AAA networking protocol providers, which is basically authentication, authorization, and accounting. Okay, and this basically means that it will do all three of those items. Our AAAs, remember, are base for keeping things secure. So the difference between them is Radius basically piles them all together and looks after both the authentication, the authorization, and the accounting in one sort of centralized system. Okay, it tends to get used by ISPs and enterprise to manage access to the networks and ensure that only authorized people can get access to it. So it is really good. TACATS Plus takes a slightly separate approach. And what it does, it is a AAA protocol, but what it does is it separates them out. So it separates authentication from authorization to accountancy, and it breaks them into separate functions. Now, you'll tend to see this much more on Cisco-based systems. So if you've got a Cisco router or a Cisco firewalls that's broken, it's probably going to be using the Tachicus rather than the Radius system. And this is because Cisco prefer it and they think it's better. It is better, it is more secure, but the difference between the two is pretty vendor selective, and it's pretty much a choice for when you basically purchase the items. So Radius is multi-vendor, lots of different companies will use that format, whereas Cisco tends to basically use the Radius one, or the Tachicus one, sorry. Now, those are pretty general things, and you will find those when you basically go and get a job and you have to use one or the other. It's important you just understand the difference that the Radius bundles all three of those AAAs, authentication, authorization, and accounting into one group, and they manage it all centrally. So security measures best practice. We said we would talk about these two. We have two-factor authentication. We have essentially single sign-on, so SSOs, and we have password complexity, which is fairly important. So let's have a look at our two-factor authentication. The basics of two-factor authentication is that we are asking you for two items to validate who you are. So it's an additional security layer. So it's no good if someone's just basically hacked your password and they're trying to do credential stuffing into everything just with your password. They need the second piece of information. Now, we tend to break these into three separate categories. So something you know, so a password, a PIN, an answer to a security session. That is something you know. Something you have is a physical device, such as our good old-fashioned smartphones. Yes, we include the smartphones, a security token, or a smart card. These are things like our badges and things like that. Or something you are. Something you are basically refers to biometrics. Okay, so we're talking fingerprints, facial recognitions, or indeed, the far out there, the retina scan things. Yes, it's not just in movies. There are people out there that do use retina scans to verify people. So with two-factor authentication, they just ask you for two. So what's the difference between 2FA and MFA? MFA uses the same process, knowledge, a possession, or something inheritance, or something that you are. The difference between 2FA and MFA is 2FA will let you produce two from the same list. So it can be two from the knowledge list, can be two from the possessions list, can be two from the inherent list. MFA insists they are from different ones. So it will be a password and your retina scan, or a password and a ping on your mobile phone. That's multi-factor authentication, whereas two-factor authentication, you can have simply with a password and then a PIN number. Is everyone clear on? Let's have a thumbs up if you understood the difference between the two. Arnie Paulberg, good. Thumbs down if you don't understand it. I'm not going to go through it again. You need a better explanation, I could probably find one. That is the big difference between MFA and 2FA. 2FA, you can pick two from the same list. MFA, it's got to be two from different lists. Good, I can see most of you getting that. That's fantastic. Cool. Let's have a little chat about best practices SSO. Single sign-on. Let's have a show of hands. I love showing of hands. Who uses single sign-on at the moment? Should have asked it the other way around, shouldn't I? I might have got more of a response. Me, Marty, well done. Is it rude of me to ask which single sign-on provider you use? Gmail. Gmail's not a single sign-on, is it? Ah, see. I think the diagram might confuse people. That's good. I like that. Certainly Gmail or Google clients essentially has a single sign-on to the Google workspace. Okay, that gets you onto Gmail, that gets you onto Google Sheets, Google Docs, and the chat windows, doesn't it? All the Google chats. That doesn't count as a single sign-on. I love the idea. It should do, because it really is, but it isn't in the way that we tend to look at single sign-ons. What a single sign-on does is it takes away all the hassle of your sign-on responsibilities for individual applications. So what you do is you simply go to a vendor and go, I want to have single sign-on, and it says, right, what apps do you use? Well, you go, I use Gmail, I use Workday, I use Slack, I use Office 365, I've got a GitHub account, I've got these, and it kind of goes, right, okay, well, we're going to look after all the passwords and all the security for it. We're going to make it super hot, super secure. All you've got to do is sign on to our website. Okay, and the sign on to the website is normally a multi-factor authentication one. So with a phone, passcode, or another device, and you sign on once. And that will then allow them to authenticate you to every single other application. That means when you click on Workdays doesn't go, you need to give me a username and password, because the single sign-on handles that. As you click on it, it passes all the credentials to that application and goes, right, here's his credentials. There you go, he's signed on. So it's normally accessed through a web portal. And your web portal will simply come as a web portal that has icons for all of these different items. And you click onto that icon. As I said, it passes all the security details through to that application and goes, yep, that's okay. You don't need to ask him for a username and password. Samsung Pass. I've not run across that one before, but I would certainly look into that in the future. Certainly, Magic. So you can see the benefit of this is that you no longer have to worry about your passwords. You don't have to worry about the security of it. The single sign-on provider does it. It enhances your security because now I'm no longer going, oh, I'll set that one to password 1, I'll set that one to password 2, that one to password 3. We're now no longer doing that. I know we're not popping into a keychain anymore, which is really good. But all those work ones are basically handled and looked after by essentially that third party. So that's the benefit of single sign-ons. A lot of companies use it for all their company products rather than for personal stuff. But you can get single sign-on. I know I looked at it about 10 years ago, and I discovered that it was actually fairly pricey because they would tend to do the charging per application you added per user. And it got a little bit scary for what we were trying to do, so we kind of ditched it. Any questions about single sign-ons? I'll give you a second there. I think we're all good with that, aren't we? An obvious one. Again, reiterating some of the stuff we've gone through and stuff we all potentially should be looking at anyway. Best practice, complex passwords. I've had a lot of discussions with security teams, IT managers, and people along this sort of area about what a complex password should consist of. Not just what it should consist of. We know it's upper, lower cases, numbers, special characters. Yes, all that needs to be crammed into it. Okay, avoiding guessable information. So not pets' names, not your names, not streets, locations, or towns and villages and things like that. A different password needs to be used on every single account. Yes, we like a different one on each account. We don't want them to find one password and then all of a sudden they can simply use that password across all our accounts. You know, we use password generators and password managers. Update regularly. That's the piece that I nearly cry about. The problem that I have with this is that a lot of companies will have a policy. They're going, we're going to be super secure, we're going to be really tight, we're going to force our users to change the password every 6 months. If I have to change my password for my laptop every 6 months, I'm going to pick an easy password I can guess, an easy password I can remember. Okay, I'm not going to pick a really complex one. I'm going to pick one that I can easily change. So again, I'm picking, one of a bad example, I'm picking password 1. When they ask me to change it in 6 months' time, it's password 2. 12 months' time, it's password 3. I hate that because I think what we should do is ask them for a really complex password to start with, make sure it meets all the requirements, and then go, that's fine. That's your password until we get compromised. And the IT manager should look after that compromised password in their own way with essentially things like IDs and IPs and all that sort of things. Okay, so I think I should be able to pick a password that is massively random across my keyboard that no one will ever guess. But hold on, I'm going to remember that. And it could be 15 characters that I'm only going to remember. But if you ask me to change it, well, next week I'm just simply going to put a 2 on the end. Again, it kind of breaks the idea of what you're trying to achieve. No one's going to go and think, right, this month I need to pick another really complex password that is meaningless that I'm never going to remember next week when I come into work. Straight away, they do forgot password and they simply go back to the original one and put a 2 on the end. That's my opinion. There are other options out there. So that's my approach on passwords. Definitely recommend that. Other things that we can do. Yes, we can harden our PC. How many Mac users have a guest account? Hands up for those Mac users. How many Mac users have a guest account on your Mac? Don't have to be shy about admitting it. Oh, no one. That's good. We've all been pretty good then. certainly on Windows, Mac, Linux systems. Why are we having a guest account? We should know who's logging onto that PC, that item, that Mac, that Linux device. We should know who it is. Why we have a guest account. Let's disable it. Let's get rid of it. Let's delete it. Okay. Enforce a strong password policy. We can go into our systems and we can set strong password policies for these systems. And indeed, your IT managers and stuff will be in charge of that. Personal security you're talking about here. So yes, just enforce that strong password. And have a look at your Windows firewall. Make sure it's enabled, because it is, again, a second line of defense. Once they get through the main firewall, your individual firewall on your endpoint is basically another line of protection. And then last but not least, keep your system updated. Again, those updates aren't for fun. Those updates are where someone has noticed a security breach, a potential place for a hacker to get onto your system. They've released a patch that stops them. Why would you not install that patch? It's like someone saying your back door's open and you just kind of go, yeah, I know it is, and ignoring it. So you go to the back door and you lock it. That's what they're telling you to do. That's what security patches are. Any questions about hardening a Windows PC or indeed a Mac or any other box? I think it's fairly self-explanatory, isn't it? So everyone's favorite subject, antivirus software. Let's have a war for antivirus software. We know the whole point of an antivirus software is to protect against malware. It detects it, removes it. We can have real-time scanning. So when we open a file, the antivirus software will read that file to make sure it's not a virus. And it'll compare it against a whole load of virus definitions that it pulls off the internet. We can also run scheduled scans. So my scheduled scan is once a week. It runs a full system scheduled scan. And if it fails to run it on a particular day because I'm not in, it will then run it the next day I am. Make sure you do those. You get two options with these scans. You can basically, if it finds an item that it thinks is a virus, you'll either quarantine it, put it somewhere where it won't ever get run and let you know about it, or it will remove it, delete it, clear it off the system. That's what it's there for, isn't it? But just as with your operating system, you've got to make sure you run the automatic updates, because this is updating your protection. Re-changing your locks all the time, isn't it? Now, the good old-fashioned antiviruses years ago simply protected your system. It literally sat, looked after your hard disk drive, looked after what it is doing. The modern ones, yes, they do web browse protection. So when you're on a website, it's secretly looking at that website, checking out the details of it, making sure the website isn't doing anything nefarious, checking the reputation of that website to make sure that website is doing a good thing. It has got a green tick in its box from all these variety of companies that look after those websites. And it also does email scanning. So when we receive an email, it's not just throwing it into the junk box. Anything that notices that's really suspicious, it might well happily delete, depending on how you've got it configured. They might put it into a special box and let you know, ping you a little notification to say. And then there's the clever ones that basically do the anti-phishing in our email system. Well, of course, Macs do have antiviruses, but because they're targeted a lot less, people don't tend to run them if it's on a personal Mac. Business Macs, I would suggest, yeah, potentially they are basically starting to put those on. They are a smaller target, but they are still a potential target nowadays. So Macs, you can get antiviruses, and indeed, I think, fairly sure that Sophos basically does one, BitTorrent, not BitTorrent, Malwarebytes might do one, Panda does one. So all those regular people, I think, basically are doing those for the Macs. Now, when we talk about, I'm going to have a little bit of a caveat here. Antiviruses on your endpoints are essential. They're essential within business. One thing I will flag here is the word real-time scanning. If you are running an operating system, say, for example, because we run antiviruses on servers. If you're running a server operating system, and the whole job of that server operating system, indeed its work and what it's basically doing, it's constantly opening lots of files, closing files, open files, closing files, open file, closing files, that real-time scan can be a massive burden on the disk drive, on the processor as well. Because what you're doing is you're opening every single file, antivirus is checking it, and then it's handing it on to the user. That antivirus check is obviously processor intensive. So you will find that sometimes that is turned off for those particular systems that require a lot of file access. Rossana asked a question there. Is Clam antivirus on Linux reliable? Well, how can I tell you it's reliable? I've never had, it's one of those questions. I've never had a Linux box that's been attacked yet. Touch wood. Okay, so let's actually have a look. So we're going to break into some breakout rooms. This particular website here that I know Ragib is desperately about to paste straight into live chat because he's so efficient, is where you can check it out. So what I'd like you basically to do is in the groups, have another little chat about this. We're going to give you 5 minutes for this. Have a look at either your antivirus and compare how it stacks up against all the others. You will be able to find the antivirus for Macs, and I think Linux boxes on there separate. So if you've got a Linux box, have a look and simply just chat amongst each other about how good yours is or how not so good yours is, and potentially just do some comparative conversations. So we're going to now pop you into your 3 breakout rooms. I'm going to drop into one and then join the other one just to see how you're doing. When you come back, we're just going to have a free form open conversation in live chat about some of this and ask a few pointed questions. Welcome back, everyone. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that little breakout room. The idea was simply to get you chatting about what you're basically doing and what the antiviruses are out there. We can see there's lots of different tools out there that will manage our antivirus systems. Windows, from Avast to AVG to Avira to Bitdefender, etc., out there. There are paid ones and there are some free ones. We know with the Windows platform, we basically have the Windows Defender that is fairly decent, but is it the best? It does what it says on the tin, doesn't it? And indeed, there are ones that do a bit more complicated stuff that you will end up paying for. So let me drop back into the presentation. I think we will have a good little chat about that. Anyone, sort of thumbs up here, anyone actually, or wave of hands, anyone going to change their antivirus software based on what they've seen on that list? Oh, no, your chances are that most people have actually had to think about this anyway, and we kind of go and pick something that is in our price range, and B, does what it says on the tin. Paul's still not getting one. Thank you, Paul. So it is really a case of choice, but please make sure that you have one on there that basically will protect the system. So we know if we get infected, the antivirus system is designed to basically protect us, but if something does actually get through, the antivirus system should be able to remedy that. It should be able to identify the threat for us, and it will probably pick it up when we do a system scan if it's managed to sneak past the firewalls. And when it basically does that, it will isolate the infection, it'll remove the malware from the system, it'll track as much of it down as possible, and potentially then might have to restore from backup. So if it has actually corrupted any of your files or encrypted any of your files, yes, you might need to bring those back from a backup. As soon as you've done that, make sure you update the system, make sure you update the firewall. It's got in somehow, so it's got in via a backdoor somewhere. So make sure that you run any updates you should be doing to try and protect yourselves from future attacks. So remediation is not as good as a proactive fix. We need to make sure that we're on top of this. Be on top of it because it can take hours to basically remediate your system if it does get infected. Other things, kind of stepping away from just simply the antivirus stuff, is web anonymity. We like to do things secretly, not secretly, privately is probably the best way to look at it. Okay, it can help protect us against cyber attacks. It's also good for things such as freedom of speech. We end up doing this essentially with VPN connections. So a virtual private network will have two terminologies. When we have a private VPN, we are essentially tunneling out through a system. So the normal direction, when we basically connect through, you can see our user external IP address is presented as we go onto the internet. The activity collector can sit there, and as the stuff bounces through the internet, it can basically hack onto that and gain the information for it. The way that a private VPN does is it creates a secret tunnel through to your VPN provider. That VPN provider will then give you a random external IP address, so they don't know it is coming from your location. And that external IP address can be in a different country. This is a good way to stream movies that haven't been released in your country yet by faking the fact you might be in America or France or another country that has those movies. Not sure if it's totally legal, but that's one way to do it. Okay, and that secret private VPN tunnel essentially protects your anonymity. That VPN provider will then not give any details away. The idea is the active collector will be able to see that someone is surfing for those details, but they won't be able to see that it comes from your IP address. They'll only see it coming from this massive IP address that your external VPN provider has. So they won't be able to link search details, your common searches, with a particular location or a particular user. So that's what the VPNs basically do for you. Now, there is a load of private VPN providers. I won't go through them. I won't go through any details, but here, there's some additional content here. That will literally allow you to pick a decent one for you if you haven't already got one.
Today, I'm going to show you guys how you can set up a.
So there's several links there that talk about how to set up a VPN and how to pick which particular VPN you're going to use. And they are whipped through those, isn't it? There. Okay, so there's a couple of links out for you to look at private VPNs if you want to have a look at those. So we're kind of coming to the end. Has anyone got any particular questions around that? I'm going to pop across to the conclusion. I can see Paul's typing there. We will come back to whatever it is you're typing, Paul. I'll do the conclusion. Proton is good, no logs. Very true. When you pick a VPN provider, your VPN provider, be careful because your VPN provider gets all your details in terms of what you are searching. Now, in the small print, somewhere on the lines, there are particular tick boxes that say they will not ever, ever, ever share any of those details with anyone. And then some of them possibly don't have that tick box. And what they'll do is they'll collect all these details about searches and everything that's been going on, and they'll sell them to someone else. They might not sell your details in terms of your IP address and who you were, but what they'll do is they'll be able to say people in the UK are surfing for this in general. And that's a database that they will then sell. So go careful as to who you pick and make sure it is that big promise of never sharing those details on. Well, some countries do ban VPNs, but it's really tricky to police. That's the problems with VPNs. Not problems, it's the joy of it. People use it for anonymity and it allows them to make comments in countries that may not like them making comments. Luca basically points out, you get nothing for free, do you, Luca? The free versions are making money with information, so they are potentially selling your information on. You pay for it and you get anonymity across the board. So today, as a conclusion, we kind of discussed about personal cybersecurity. Much more details basically when we go through the business security, at least we go into the business end of things. We talked about how to protect our personal data and information. We talked about the attack vectors that people are going to be using to get onto our systems and gain our information. And we spoke about password policies, two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentications, and other ways that we can protect ourselves. And we've had a good chat and a bit of a play with different antivirus systems. Anyone got any further questions then before we start wrapping it up? Luca, very true. There is no free in this world. Yes, if you want a decent VPN, unfortunately, you will have to pay for it. They're not expensive, depending on what you consider to be expensive. They're not crazy expensive. Okay. And bear in mind, although they do add an extra hop on your network traffic, because you're now, instead of going directly to internet hops, you're going to your VPN provider and then hopping on. Potentially, those VPN providers are closer to some of the main hubs. So they may promise to speed you up because they are able to, because they get closer to the main hubs. Well, else says McAfee comes to the VPN. I didn't know they were doing that thrown in. Yeah, Blam, well done. Except the air we breathe. The air we breathe is free. Sometimes, anyway. Someone will tax it at some point, won't they? I think the malware bytes one, I think the VPN connection is a chargeable tack-on. I might be wrong on that, Marty, but I think it offered it to me a little while ago, and I said, no, I didn't really want it. But as I say, a lot of these will do, a lot of the antivirus systems you buy will simply go, here's our main bundle. Oh, and do you want to buy this? Do you want to buy that? Do you want to buy that? And they'll add tack-ons and they'll additional charges. Some people like them, but it gives you a choice. That's the benefit. It's the choices. There are a couple of you typing in there, so that's good. Yeah, different pack. Okay, Marty's basically confirmed it. Yeah, different packages, more money to earn. Yes, that's what it's about, isn't it? Well, I don't know about you all. I've really enjoyed getting back in the saddle and coming on with these lectures again. It's been great fun. Thank you very much for the interactions that we've had. I've really enjoyed those. I hope you enjoyed the couple of breakout sessions for you all to have a good chat amongst yourselves. I hope you find those have been productive as well. Paul Bird loves the subject. Great stuff, Paul. Thank you very much for your interactions. I'm going to hang around and answer any questions that you've actually posed in the live chat. I think we're probably all done for this video, aren't we?